Imagine a single software company waking up one morning and, I don't know, deciding to build gigawatt power plants, draft national tax policies, and just,
Quietly kill a viral video tool that had a Hollywood absolutely terrified just a month ago.
right. I mean, that isn't a pitch for some dystopian sci-fi movie. That is a factual summary of what OpenAI did in a single 7-day window.
It genuinely redefines our understanding of corporate scope. Like, we are looking at a week where the fundamental architecture of the intelligence economy was essentially rewritten in real time.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this deep dive, you likely follow tech. Updates usually mean a tweaked interface or maybe a slightly faster app.
Exactly, just incremental stuff.
Right. But for this deep dive, our mission is highly specific. We are looking exclusively at OpenAI's updates from March 29 to April 4th, 2026.
Because those 7 days mark the definitive pivot. Like the transition from a consumer software startup into a sovereign-level industrial infrastructure provider.
I mean, they're now reporting $2 billion a month in revenue. $2 billion.
The scale of that capital generation is just breathtaking. But to truly grasp the business mechanics behind that number, we have to look under the hood at the core technical transition happening right now.
Which is?
We've officially moved past conversational chatbots, systems that essentially just predict the next word. We've crossed over into the era of autonomous reasoning agents.
Meaning systems that actively think, plan, and execute multi-step tasks without us having to hold their hand.
Correct. And that shift toward agentic reasoning dictates a completely new universe of hardware requirements, capital expenditure, and even, as we'll get into, public policy.
So to see why, we should probably look at the actual science published during this 1-week window, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
The era of cheap chat is over. The era of premium, resource-heavy reasoning has arrived.
Let's unpack the science then, because there's this fascinating global paper published on April 3rd on ArtSICAP. The headline is Fermi SAC, Agents for Particle Theory. And it looks like they are applying these autonomous agents to high-level physics. But wait, an adversarial loop in quantum physics?
Yeah, it's wild.
Does that mean they're setting up a generative agent to propose a theory and a separate critic agent to just tear it apart using simulation data? Because that's not just summarizing data, that's synthesizing net new science.
That's exactly what it is. The researchers presented a scaffolded reasoning model using OpenAI agents that autonomously read complex experimental papers, generate novel quantum field theory hypotheses, and then actually validate them by piping them through particle physics simulation pipelines.
That is insane.
Right. The methodology there is what matters most. That proposer-critic loop you mentioned, it bridges the gap between raw data and theoretical insight in a highly expert domain.
So they aren't just waiting for a prompt anymore.
No, not at all. It proves these models are active adversarial participants in the scientific method. One agent proposes, another aggressively looks for mathematical flaws. They just iterate until they find a robust hypothesis.
But having AI debate quantum physics with itself sounds incredibly computationally expensive.
Oh, it is. Extremely.
Which connects perfectly to another paper published globally on April 1st, also on ArcSIF, titled In Harmony with GPT. This one analyzed the hardware constraints of running open models, specifically a 20 billion parameter model called GPT-OSS.
Right, and the findings here completely dismantle a prevailing myth about local AI.
Which myth?
Well, the long-standing assumption was that you could easily run a 20 billion parameter model on a high-end consumer graphics card with, say, 16 gigabytes of VRAM.
Okay.
And for simple text chat, that holds true. But this independent research demonstrated that if you want that same model to function as an agent, doing the kind of long-horizon autonomous work we just saw in the particle physics paper,
Right.
needing 16 gigabytes is completely inadequate.
I need an analogy here because if the brain of the model, like the weights, is the exact same size, why does the memory requirement suddenly explode just because it's doing a different job?
Okay, think about reading a massive, complex 1,000-page textbook. As you read, you keep the overarching plot and previous chapters in your head, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine if every single time you turn the page, you magically forgot everything you just read.
Oh, wow.
You'd have to reread the entire book from chapter 1 over and over again, just to understand the context of the next sentence.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare, and it would take forever.
Exactly. And that is exactly what happens to a model without a sufficiently massive KV cache, which is basically its short-term memory.
Ah, okay.
When an agent is working across a 128,000 token context window, preserving that KV cache so that it doesn't have to endlessly reprocess its own history requires skyrocketing amounts of hardware memory.
So the latency would otherwise just be unbearable.
Precisely. So the model weights might be small, but the memory footprint required for actual reasoning is immense.
So we are essentially hitting a hardware wall for reasoning.
Right.
And that is mathematically confirmed by the third piece of research from March 30th, the tiered supermore hypothesis.
Yeah.
I read the summary report from Gemini on this. They analyzed 318 different models. They found that for economy tier tokens, the cheap ones used for basic chat, the price drops by half every 1.1 years.
Right, the race to the bottom.
But for cognitive reasoning tokens, like those used in OpenAI's GPT 5.4 Pro, they maintain a massive price premium. The reasoning tokens cost an average of 31.5 times more than non-reasoning tokens.
Yeah, the paper mathematically defines this bifurcated AI economy. You have that race to the bottom for basic text generation, and then a high-margin, resource-constrained premium market for actual cognitive labor.
So just to put this in perspective for the listener, if agentic memory is expanding, our hardware needs to preserve that KV cache, and the reasoning itself costs over 30 times more than basic text. Aren't we basically building Ferrari engines but realizing we can't afford the fuel to run them all?
That is a great way to put it. And the physics and economics of that reality forced OpenAI to make some incredibly ruthless product decisions during this exact same week.
Right.
If reasoning is your high-margin, resource-heavy future, you simply cannot afford to burn compute on things that don't directly drive that future.
Which brings us to the sudden, shocking death of Sora.
Yeah.
On March 29th, a Wall Street Journal investigation, which was covered by TechCrunch, exposed the brutal economics behind OpenAI's video generator. I mean, this was the tool that had the entire film industry in a panic just a few months ago, and OpenAI just killed it.
They had to. The financial drain was unsustainable. The investigation revealed that Sora was burning through $1 million a day purely in raw compute costs.
$1 million a day.
And concurrently, the user base had cratered. It peaked at 1 million users and quickly fell to under 500,000.
Because, generating a hyper-realistic video of a cyberpunk city is a fun novelty for Twitter, but it isn't a daily utility for enterprise businesses.
Exactly.
And they killed a massive billion-dollar partnership with Disney to do this, right?
Yeah, the reporting suggests CEO Sam Altman made the hard call to instantly reallocate all of Sora's massive compute resources. The Disney deal just became collateral damage.
Wow.
They desperately needed those GPUs, not to render videos, but to finish pre-training Spud.
Okay, I have to ask about these internal code names. Spud. They burned a bridge with Disney for something called Spud. Please tell me Spud is doing something revolutionary to justify that.
Well, Spud is OpenAI's next frontier mixture of experts model.
Wait, mixture of experts.
Yeah.
Is that the architecture where instead of activating one giant brain for every query, you have a bunch of specialized mini brains, and a router just sends the prompt to the specific expert needed?
That's the one.
Meaning it's way cheaper and faster to run.
That is the exact mechanism. You maintain a massive total parameter count for broad knowledge, but you drastically reduce the active parameters used during inference.
Ah.
Spud is the engine for their next generation of efficient reasoning agents. They ruthlessly culled visual novelty to prioritize pure, high-margin cognitive utility.
That makes total strategic sense. And it wasn't just Sora getting the axe. On April 3rd, they officially retired the GPT-4 generation.
Right.
According to the OpenAI Help Center, GPT-4 was entirely removed from business, enterprise, and edu custom GPTs.
Yep.
API access remains, but for workspace users, it's just gone. This feels like they are physically shoving the enterprise ecosystem out the door and forcing them to migrate their autonomous workflows to the GPT 5.4 series.
Oh, the migration is absolutely mandatory because maintaining legacy models fragments their compute clusters. If the goal is ubiquitous agentic reasoning, you have to force developers onto the architecture built for it.
Speaking of developers, the way they are selling access changed dramatically too. On March 31st and April 2nd, OpenAI launched pay-as-you-go pricing for Codex, their coding agent.
This is a huge shift.
Yeah. They dropped the standard ChatGPT business price from $25 to $20 a seat per month. But the real story is these Codex-only seats that build purely on token consumption with zero rate limits. If you're listening to this and wondering why your personal $20 subscription feels less important to them now, look at this Codex pricing. They are hunting for massive enterprise deployments.
It operates as a highly effective wedge strategy. By removing the fixed cost barriers and throwing in $500 in workspace credits, they're aggressively targeting developer-heavy organizations.
Because it's cheaper to get started.
Exactly. A company doesn't need to buy 500 full enterprise licenses up front. They just pay for the exact tokens their massive fleets of autonomous coding bots consume.
They also released the Codex CLI version 11.11.0, which notably includes a new Windows OS level proxy sandbox. I assume this is about enterprise paranoia.
Totally.
Like, if you let an autonomous coding agent loose on a bank's proprietary code base, you need an ironclad guarantee it can't leak data or touch restricted networks.
Yeah, security is the primary bottleneck for enterprise adoption. An OS-level proxy sandbox strictly isolates the agent's environment at the operating system level. It essentially removes the compliance friction for highly regulated industries.
So they are locking down the developers, but they haven't forgotten the consumer transit space either. On April 2nd, ChatGPT officially launched an Apple CarPlay.
Right.
According to the Help Center, users with iOS 26.4 or newer can initiate hands-free voice conversations using OpenAI's real-time interface directly from their dashboard. So it's not just typing on a phone anymore. They want to be the ambient intelligence in your car, competing directly with whatever AI the automakers are trying to build.
The strategy is omnipresence. They are embedding their reasoning engines into the physical transit of daily life.
Yeah.
But you have to realize, powering millions of coding bots in enterprise sandboxes while simultaneously running voice-first agents in millions of cars, the physical infrastructure required to sustain that is almost difficult to conceptualize.
Which brings us to the actual hardware footprint. On April 4th, we got details on the Stargate infrastructure expansion.
The scale of this is wild. It really is. The big news here is a massive geographic pivot. OpenAI backed away from further expansion at its Abilene, Texas site, leaving Microsoft to take over, and is pushing forward on a new flagship facility in Wisconsin, along with other international sites.
Right.
Why walk away from Texas?
Because the constraint is no longer just silicon. It is raw electrical power and heat dissipation.
Okay.
Stargate is a $500 billion infrastructure initiative. OpenAI is facing a projected $14 billion annual loss, primarily because of these facilities. They are hunting for 2.1 gigawatt data centers.
Let's just pause on that number, 2.1 gigawatts.
Yeah.
That is the power draw of a medium-sized city.
Yeah.
For one single data center. The thermodynamics demand it. Because reasoning models require such dense clusters of GPUs, the facilities require massive 900-megawatt on-site power plants just to function reliably. You cannot rely on standard grid transmission for that density without catastrophic efficiency losses. So OpenAI has to diversify its physical footprint across markets that offer the most favorable regulatory environments for on-site power generation and robust water tables for cooling.
And Wisconsin fits that bill better.
Yes. Wisconsin offered a better matrix for those specific industrial needs than further expanding in Texas.
Okay, so OpenAI is hunting for gigawatt power plants and projecting $14 billion losses to build them. They aren't acting like a software company. They're operating like a global logistics and power utility.
Absolutely. And the moment a corporation begins consuming resources at a nation-state level, it inevitably begins proposing policies at a nation-state level.
Yeah.
The impact is just too large to ignore.
Which perfectly sets up the April 3rd release from OpenAI's Global Affairs team. They published a policy paper titled Industrial Policy for the Intelligence Age.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be incredibly clear to everyone listening. We are strictly neutral here. We are not endorsing these ideas, and we are not taking a political stance.
Right, just reporting the facts.
Exactly. We are simply imparting the contents of OpenAI's original source documents. But looking objectively at what they proposed, it is staggering.
The document reads less like a corporate white paper and more like a macroeconomic legislative platform.
Let's list the key proposals. They suggested creating a public wealth fund to pay a citizen's dividend. They proposed a robot tax on corporate profits generated by automated work.
Yep.
They called for a standardized 4-day work week. And unsurprisingly, given what we just discussed, they asked for federal streamlining for data center permitting.
Right.
What is the underlying logic here? How does a public wealth fund actually offset the labor displacement caused by their own coding agents?
Okay, so the economic theory they are floating works like this. If an enterprise deploys a fleet of Codex agents and displaces, say, 30% of its human software engineers,
Right.
that company's profit margin will theoretically spike due to lower payroll costs. The proposed robot tax would capture a percentage of that specific automated profit spike.
Oh, I see.
Those tax revenues would then feed into the public wealth fund, which distributes a dividend to citizens, basically cushioning the economic blow for the displaced workers.
So they're actively acknowledging that their software is going to break the current labor model, and they are trying to write the new social contract before regulators do it blindly.
Exactly.
And they're already operating on this global logistical scale elsewhere. Look at March 29th. In partnership with the Gates Foundation, OpenAI hosted the inaugural AI Jam for Disaster Management in Bangkok.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
They brought 50 disaster management leaders from 13 countries across Southeast and South Asia to apply AI to real-time humanitarian logistics.
And the application of reasoning agents in that context is profoundly different from a chatbot. They are turning the models into localized logistical tools for high-stakes emergency response in disaster-prone regions.
So it's not just writing code.
No, it demonstrates the utility of AI in coordinating physical life-saving supply chains, not just drafting emails or answering trivia.
But to fund these ambitions, gigawatt power plants, global disaster logistics, advocating for robot taxes, you need a treasury that makes traditional Silicon Valley funding look like pocket change.
Oh, yeah.
On March 31st, we saw exactly how they plan to pay for all of this. OpenAI officially closed a $122 billion funding round.
The largest private capital raise in tech history. It brings their post-money valuation to $852 billion.
And the composition of this round is fascinating. We have a $50 billion commitment from Amazon, though that is contingent on achieving AGI or an IPO.
Right.
You have $30 billion from NVIDIA, but that is entirely non-cash. It's essentially compute credits.
Yeah.
$30 billion from SoftBank. And this is the part that stood out to me. They raised over $3 billion from retail investors via banking channels.
Yeah.
Why go through the hassle of dealing with everyday retail investors when you have SoftBank and Amazon writing $30 billion checks?
Honestly, it is a brilliant piece of geopolitical engineering. By bringing retail investors in through banking channels, OpenAI is essentially creating a massive base of everyday citizens who are now financially vested in the company's success.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. When you're proposing radical legislation like streamlined data center permitting or robot taxes, having millions of public shareholders gives you tremendous political leverage.
Wow.
Furthermore, the NVIDIA deal tethers OpenAI directly to the hardware supply chain. They secure the exact compute capacity they need without exchanging actual liquid cash.
It's an ecosystem play. And the metrics they released to justify this $852 billion valuation are wild. $2 billion in monthly revenue, 900 million weekly active users, 15 billion tokens processed every single minute.
The sheer velocity of those tokens proves that the transition to automated enterprise workflows is already happening.
So they raise a GDP-sized war chest of $122 billion, and what do they do just 2 days later?
Buy a media company.
Yeah. On April 2nd, OpenAI acquired TBPN, the Technology Business Programming Network. This is a daily live Silicon Valley tech talk show hosted by John Coogan and Jordy Hayes.
Yeah.
They bought it for the hundreds of millions and integrated the entire 11-person team directly into OpenAI's strategy organization. I have to push back here. Why on earth does an infrastructure company need to own a talk show?
The acquisition is entirely about narrative control. When a company is proposing 4-day work weeks and trying to rewire the global economy, traditional public relations is insufficient.
Right, a press release won't cut it.
Exactly. You need a directly owned, popular media channel to shape the public discourse and explain your reasoning to the tech ecosystem without relying on external journalists.
So let me get this straight. They raised $122 billion. They use it to build the gigawatt data centers holding the hardware. They build the agentic software that runs on the hardware. And now they own the news cycle that talks about the software.
It's an end-to-end closed loop.
But does this massive bet on reasoning models actually work in practice for the enterprise? Like today?
The data says yes. Consider the enterprise case study published on April 1st concerning Gradient Labs, the startup in London.
Right, they build AI account managers for banks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gradient Labs implemented a highly efficient hybrid architecture. They route the complex, reasoning-heavy steps of a banking customer's interaction to GPT 4.1.
Okay.
But to radically reduce latency and cost, they aggressively route the simpler deterministic tasks like checking an account balance or verifying an address to the smaller GPT 5.4 mini and nano models.
Which explains the incredible metrics in this report. By using that routing mechanism, they achieved 10x revenue growth and got their response latency down to 500 milliseconds.
Right?
That is fast enough to feel like a seamless human conversation. But the stat that blew me away was the 97% trajectory accuracy.
Yeah, in a heavily regulated industry like banking, trajectory accuracy is everything. It means the autonomous agent successfully adhered to the bank's strict, complex procedural workflows from start to finish 97% of the time.
And a
The
competition.
competition's accuracy hovered around 88%.
Oh, wow.
That 9% delta is the difference between a viable product and massive regulatory fines. It mathematically proves that OpenAI's pivot toward specialized, highly accurate reasoning models is commercially viable in the real world.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the sheer, overwhelming scope of what we just covered. This all happened between March 29th and April 4th.
Just 7 days.
In 7 days, we saw autonomous agents validating quantum physics. We watched them kill Sora, a beloved visual toy, because the compute was too precious. We saw them hunt for 2.1 gigawatt power plants in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We analyzed their proposal for a national robot tax. And we watched them close a $122 billion funding round before casually buying a media network.
The timeline really highlights the velocity of this transition. They have fundamentally abandoned the consumer chatbot identity. They are operating, investing, and legislating at the scale of industrial infrastructure.
Which leaves you with a lingering, almost uncomfortable question to mull over. If a single corporate entity is building the physical power infrastructure, proposing the public economic policy, distributing the global intelligence, and owning the media channels that report on all of it, where exactly does the software company end and the digital nation state begin? Keep that in mind the next time you casually ask ChatGPT to read your emails from the dashboard of your car.